Hello everyone and welcome to yet another video. Today I think we're just going to get straight into it. Because yes, there was some big news finally about the Southport attacks as finally the, well I guess it's not so alleged anymore, but the murder of Southport went to trial. And the Times had a pretty good biography of the guy, which I think is quite interesting to go to find out how he ended up, well, in the state he's in now, I suppose, after murdering 3 girls, stabbing 8 others, I think it was, and then a couple of other adults were stabbed, how he's ended up pleading guilty to all this, and that, yes, does include a terrorism charge. So apologies for these graphic details that we're about to go through, but the dance was drawing to a close just before midday on July 29, 2024, when Axel Rudakubana jumped out of the car after a 15-minute drive and made the final part of his journey toward Heart Space, a nondescript community studio tucked behind residential buildings in the centre of Southport, Merseyside. And I've said this in an earlier video, from the sounds of it, Axel actually knew that this place existed. And as to why exactly he chose this place, it's not fully understood. I don't particularly know if he knew this dance class was going on. I don't know if he particularly targeted small girls specifically for whatever particular reason he had for killing these girls. But it seems one of the less commented on aspects of this entire case. It's a nondescript community studio, it's behind a few residential houses. This doesn't sound random at all. This sounds very much targeted to me. Armed with a kitchen knife, Rudakubana wreaked devastation, killing 3 young girls, injuring 8 more, as well as 2 adults. In the following weeks, mourners would gather at the seaside town as funerals were held for Bebe King, 6, Elise Stancombe, 7, and Alistair Silva Aguiar, 9, whose deaths shocked the nation and triggered rioting in the streets. Well, that's certainly very accurate. Yet the Southport attack was not the first time that Rudakubana, then 17, had arrived, weapon in hand, at a building full of children with violence in mind. Yes, this is not the first time that this violent attacker had plans to violently attack a place full of children. So the Times can reveal that Rudakubana had been expelled from his former secondary after admitting to carrying a knife before going on a rampage with a hockey stick through the school corridors. He had planned an attack on that same school this summer, a week before his killing spree, just before the summer holidays. Yes, it sounds already that these cases should have already led to Rudakubana being in court, but apparently we just let him go. Government sources have also confirmed that Rudakubana was referred to counter-terrorism scheme prevent 3 times. He was referred to the scheme 3 separate times. One of those referrals related to concerns that the teenager had shown an interest in the killing of children in a school massacre. He was sent to prevent 3 times and he was still allowed to let go. How is that utter failure been allowed to happen? Now that he has admitted 3 counts of murder, 10 of attempted murder, and 3 other charges, one of which is terrorism, the question is, why was he not stopped before it was too late? Very good question. The Time then goes into some of the anecdotes from his school days. Obviously, the names here, I believe, are fake to protect identities. But anyway, it was not the fact that Rudakubana was playing the class clown that bothered Daisy. Instead, it was some of the weird things he would say. She remembered bickering with him a lot and noticing how a look would flash across his face whenever the topic of women's rights came up in class. My English teacher used to always talk about feminism and he'd kind of just sit there, she said. You could tell he didn't agree with what was being said. Okay. Rebecca, who was also in class with Rudakubana, described him as a bad egg girls were wary of. I don't think any of us liked him. I think he had a bit of sexism, okay? He made sexual jokes and the girls, well, we all just stayed away. Well, yes, making sexual jokes in front of girls who are teenagers. Not always a good idea, especially if you're, well, one of the weirdos. And apparently he left mainstream education after being expelled from Range High in 2019 during his first term of Year 9, which for those of you who aren't in Britain, that means he was about 13 or 14. The Times understands he had admitted to carrying a knife. So he left mainstream education, which implies to me he was still being educated somewhere. Just not in a school. But yes, the whole sexism thing, I mean, this is actually a problem in schools that a lot of teachers are facing, effectively because Andrew Tate is becoming so popular with young boys, because Frankly, at school, it just appears that young boys are not encouraged to, well, do things they find interesting, I think is the best way to put it. They end up just going towards the things they do find interesting, and because they don't have decent role models anymore, they go towards Andrew Tate, and that is a massive problem that the mainstream just have no idea what do they do about it? They have no idea. When in reality, you know, one of the best things they can do is push Jordan Peterson types on them because they find him interesting, and ultimately he's going to encourage boys to actually be competent people. It doesn't have to be Jordan Peterson, it's just an example, you know. Get someone who shows boys that they can be handy men or intelligent men whose main goal in life is to, you know, be able to be the rock that an entire family is based around. That is not Andrew Tate, by the way. This is why it's a massive problem. Andrew Tate is a alleged sex pest who is bringing out, frankly, some of the worst in our boys. I'm not blaming Andrew Tate, by the way, on Rudy Cabana killing young girls. That is absolutely not what I am doing. But what I am definitely trying to get across is that being a bit sceptical of feminism, even as a 13-year-old boy, does not necessarily mean that you are going to go around and kill girls, or do the other things Rudy Cabana did. 4 sources describe how shortly after he was expelled, he sneaked his way back into the school, where, armed with a hockey stick, he had planned to harm several children and teachers whose names he had written on the implement. Yeah, he just sounds crazy. Former pupils described how Rudy Cabana, then aged 13, clad in his old school uniform, had attended assembly before going on a rampage through the building. All the teachers were closing the doors and not letting anyone out, Daisy said. I kind of hate to say it. I really do hate to say it. But imagine if our gun laws were looser. I hate to say it, but there's kind of a point there, isn't there? Why didn't he manage to... I mean, to be honest with you, going around with a hockey stick's already quite questionable. If his plan was to harm people, why would he use an implement where it's quite cumbersome and quite difficult to actually harm people with it? I mean, I've used hockey sticks before. I've played hockey once or twice. I wouldn't exactly call them an ideal weapon of choice if I was actually trying to harm someone. I guess it's all he had access to, but he's coming with a knife as well. I mean, after this, obviously. I'm obviously not encouraging any of this. What I am saying is that Rudy Cabana seems to have absolutely no impulse control. That is what I'm saying here. Louise was in the corridor when Rudy Cabana ran past her and claimed he went to hit another pupil over the head with the stick. She then saw 2 members of the senior leadership team rush forward and tackle the teenager to the ground before dragging him out of the school. Several sources claimed the boy he had targeted suffered a broken arm. None knew what had led to the attack, but Louise remembered seeing other boys picking on Rudy Cabana, who was diagnosed with autism. It must have just got him and he flipped, she said. Yeah, unironically, if he does have autism, that might explain part of the impulse control problem. But again, he was picked on and has autism. Every school has an autistic kid that has been picked on. They don't all go around with a hockey stick trying to beat people, and they certainly don't go around at the age of 17 stabbing little girls. Although he could be disruptive, yes, I suppose I would call running around the school corridors with a hockey stick with names inscribed of people that you are going to try and beat and possibly kill is considered disruptive. Classmates also described the smaller-than-average boy as an odd child who was often found sitting alone. He would bring Lego to school and play with it at the back of class, one person claimed. His main interest was said to be gaming. Wow, yeah, like 90% of boys. He had been part of a dance and musical theatre group, and according to a friend, he appeared in the West End musical in 2017. He was not a normal theatre kid, however, and did not... he wasn't gay, however, and did not push for the main parts. In 2018, he was one of 4 children chosen to star in the Doctor Who-themed fundraising advertisement for BBC's Children in Need. I remember when that came up, all his mates were taking the mick out of him for being in an advert, Rebecca said. I think that annoyed him. The former pupils who graduated from Range High last summer said they had not heard of Rudy Cabana since the hockey stick incident. So, wow, that's literally 5 years ago. Until the day that their phones flashed up to inform them that their former classmate had been charged with the Southport attacks. I didn't know he had it in him to do something like that, Louise said. Are you kidding me? A kid who runs around a school with a hockey stick to attack other children, and you don't think he had it in him to attack kids? Come on. Though, to be honest, from the sounds of it, it sounds like he actually had reasons behind his ideas to attack the school here. You know, the names he inscribed, it sounds like, from what the anecdotes are being put forward, is that he was trying to effectively exact revenge on either people who bullied him or teachers that he feels like got him unfairly expelled, which, to be honest with you, it sounds... Bringing a knife to school? Of course you should be expelled for that. In fact, going back to that, when I say he has low impulse control, clearly he does, because he's brought the knife to school before. But why would he then use a hockey stick after that? I just find it so strange. Especially because presumably he used a knife to actually inscribe those names as well. Because it didn't say written on, it said inscribed. That, you need proper woodworking tools for that, or a knife will work. Such a strange episode, and again, why was this not put forward to the police? Well, to be honest, it may very well have been, but the police didn't do anything about it. Social services had known about the circumstances under which Rudy Kubana had left Range High, and a special education and healthcare plan was put in place, so that's the alternative to mainstream education. But he had stopped engaging with his mental health team prior to the attack. Okay. He had also fully engaged with and completed a youth justice referral order in 2021, which he was handed following the events at Range High. Okay, so the police were informed and gave him a justice referral order to... I don't know what that is. According to Google's AI, God, this is so useful, a youth justice referral order is a court order that requires a young person to attend a panel and sign a contract to address their offending behaviour. The order is intended to help the young person avoid reoffending and repair the harm caused by the crime. Yeah, I'm not being funny, but if you have a kid that's bringing knives into school and then are trying to attack people with a hockey stick, I think making them go in a room and sign a contract is not a great way to make sure they don't reoffend. Anyway, the Times then go into the details of the actual attack, but I've gone through the details of an attack in a previous video, and frankly I don't want to go through it again. You know what happened, you get the gist of it. 3 kids died, 8 others were injured, and 2 adults were injured. And this monster should get the absolute largest sentence that can be handed down to him. Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. So after the Times go through the details of the attack and the fact that further charges were brought to Rudy Kubana after it was found that he made ricin and also had an Al-Qaeda manual, it goes into another anecdote. Neighbours said they had suspected for a while that something strange was going on at number 10, where he lived, with one claiming they have seen police outside the house on several occasions before the attack. Again, he was known to the police and social services and Prevent. 3 times he was sent to Prevent, for God's sake. They described witnessing a struggle the week before. Rudy Kubana, dressed in the same green hoodie, had attempted to get a taxi to Range High and was only stopped by his father, who pleaded with the driver not to take him. His father knew he was going to do an attack. What? It's one of those things where, if you know your child is about to commit an atrocity, why is he pleading with him not to take him? Did he take the rice in with him? Did he take a knife? Why are you as a father having to plead with a taxi driver to not take your son somewhere? Why are you not pacifying him yourself? Well, I guess he's got a knife, so that answers that question. And why, when he didn't go, did you not take him straight to a police station? You've not done your duty as a citizen of Britain to actually stop a crime you know is happening. I mean, okay, you've stopped this particular crime. Do you really think that your son's going to stop there? Come on. Neighbours rarely saw the teenager. Liverpool Crown Court heard in August how he had become unwilling to leave the house and communicate with family for a period of time. He attended 2 Catholic primaries in Southport, Holy Family, and then his parents' first choice of school, St Patrick's, but would not re-enter mainstream education after being expelled from Range High. Yes, we saw that. He spent some time as a pupil referral unit in Lancashire before moving to Presfield High School, a specialist college for children with a diagnosis of autism. He was enrolled there from 2021 to 2022 school year, but neighbours suggested his attendance record may have been low, having only caught the odd glimpse of him. Again, it just sounds like he had a complete vendetta against Range High. And obviously, with his autism, it was severe enough to need special education for it. These formative years, bear in mind at 13, to bring a hockey stick and a knife into school, you must have had... You've either got really bad problems with his autism, where he thinks that's a good idea, or his upbringing must have been pretty poor as well. Given his father's reaction to him going to range high to obviously commit a crime was to just say to the taxi driver, please don't take him, and then appear to not do anything else. You know, was the discipline good at home? It's hard to say. Well, apparently those who remember him from earlier years painted a different picture of a typical boy often seen playing outside previous homes in Cardiff and Southport with his brother. One described them as a lovely family who had faced difficulty. Rudukubana was born in Wales, yet would often speak about his parents' native Rwanda, which they left as a result of the 1994 genocide that had killed 800,000 people, including hundreds of their relatives. His mother, Letitia Mazoria, had grown up in a relatively prosperous family, and her father had worked in the Ministry of Agriculture and her mother was a teacher, but as members of the Tutsi tribe their lives were thrown into jeopardy when the death of the Hutu president Juvenal Habyarimana in April 1994 triggered mass killings of minorities of Tutsi. Muziyira's sister called in an Al Jazeera article how their family were only saved thanks to their Hutu neighbours, who hid them and helped them reach the church in Kilgali, where they were sheltered by Father Celeste Hakizimana. An older sister who did not live with them was killed alongside her family, and it sounds like that this was then told to their son, who, I don't know, I guess in his formative years made him think he needs to be very defensive to make sure that he's not part of a genocide, I guess. I don't know, we're armchair psychologising at this point. It's really hard to say what leads a man to stab a bunch of kids, because you're hardly in a defensive position stabbing kids. So, again, this armchair psychologising, probably not conclusive. Anyway, there's a lot more detail on the family history after the genocide. Basically, they came over to Britain as refugees. The father, frankly, just seems like a relatively normal guy, doing things that I would consider to be fairly normal for someone who was trying to hide from a genocide, because he hid in the wilderness while he was being effectively hunted, and then took up arms with the RPF, who I'm going to assume are the rebel force that were against the genocide. After the genocide, he began learning karate, a hobby he would continue after being a refugee in the UK, and was described by a former coach as being hugely respectful. As I say, just seems like a normal guy. However, something clearly happened here. Friends in Rwanda described how the parents had become increasingly isolated while caring for their sons, rarely returning home together. Whenever they did, it was only for special occasions such as funerals, with one parent attending alone, a family friend explained. Rudukubana's grandmother told the Times that she had never met her grandson, though she knew he had mental health difficulties. Almost immediate... Sorry, I've just realised that that's the meme for whenever a terrorist attack happens. It was actually mental health difficulties. Almost immediately after the Southport attacks, disinformation about the suspect being Muslim flooded social media, triggering a violent mob to descend upon the town's mosques. Rioting spread across the country over the coming days. Again, the whole narrative around mosques being targeted is a bit odd. The main one was obviously the Southport riot, but if you actually look at the aftermath, the mosque didn't take any more damage than the houses surrounding it. It really seemed much more of they were getting bricks from walls to attack the police rather than actually damage the mosque. Don't get me wrong, there was certainly collateral damage with the mosque, but to say mosques were targeted in these riots, it's a little bit of a misnomer. Whenever you see pictures, it's always that Greg's being looted. It's very rarely pictures of mosques being attacked. There's a reason for that. But yes, at the time, as far as Rudukubana being Muslim was concerned, no one had any information on that, really. It's only after it turns out that he had the Al-Qaeda manual that, the claims that he converted to Islam were, substantiated by something. But even these claims are a bit contradictory to anecdotal evidence. According to several sources, the Rudukubanas were practicing Christians and very religious, with one neighbour describing how he could sometimes hear them singing hymns inside the house. That's actually quite nice. Despite their youngest son admitting to terrorism charges, the National Counter-Terrorism and Policing Unit had not designated the attack on the Hearts base as a terrorist incident, for which an ideological motive would need to be established. And I've always kind of understood that, and understood why that is the case. Attacking these girls when, from what I can tell, he doesn't really have a manifesto and was targeting schools he was expelled from before this, it almost seems like it was a random attack. The thing I am questioning is, why did he go specifically to this hidden away community centre? he must have known it existed. He must have gone there as a theatre kid when he was, doing his audition for the West End or something like that. And the question we want to know is why, but unfortunately we're probably not going to find out until later this week. It is understood that there's no evidence of Rudy Kubana harbouring any Islamic tendencies that have been uncovered by the authorities, aside obviously from the Al-Qaeda manual, but it is fair enough probably to say that with the Al-Qaeda manual, he, effectively used that to understand, well, terrorist tactics insofar as how to cause mass, murder, effectively, and he probably used it to make the ricin as well. I have no idea what's in an Al-Qaeda manual. I've never looked at one. The teenager will be sentenced on Thursday, surprised everyone, including the families of his victims, by changing his plea to guilty on what is supposed to be the first day of his trial. The judge apologised to the relatives who had been bracing themselves for the ordeal of a full trial because they were not there to hear his pleas. Not only that, but it was actually revealed that the defence lawyers were not going to put forward a defence anyway. They didn't have one, from what I could tell. I honestly, I kind of hate to be a lawyer who is being put on this case, because how do you defend someone like Rudy Kubana? It sounds almost impossible. The best you can do is mental health issues, but people are so fed up of hearing that it's probably just going to raise more tensions. Rudy Kubana had appeared in court on several occasions before then, always hiding his face under his jumper or a mask and refusing to speak, even to confirm his name, meaning no not guilty pleas had been entered by default on his behalf. Monday was the first time anyone in that courtroom had heard his voice. He did not stand up as he mumbled, "Guilty." Yes. Why he chose guilty on this occasion, I can only imagine it's because he knows he has absolutely no defence whatsoever, and guilty pleas can mean a less harsh sentence. That is the only thing I have at the moment. So yes, after all this, it turns out that Rudy Kubana was a complete social recluse, seemed to have quite an interest in his heritage of Rwanda and of course the stories of the genocide, I would imagine. Seemed to hold massive grudges against people who had wronged him, and then in the end, why did he end up going to that dance class? I don't know. Why did the parents not do anything when he had clearly attempted before to actually attack the school that he was going back to in his later years? Why, when that happened, did they not try and get social services straight on the case at the very least? Obviously, the police would be the ideal ones to call there. There's still a lot of questions around this case. And as I say, because he's being sentenced on Thursday, there will still be an embargo on some of the details of this. It's lucky that we've had some more of it out, but now that it turns out that effectively there seems to have been a complete failure by the state to actually stop this attacker when he was known to them, it just raises a lot of questions, and the Times yet again has another article going into these details. So this article starts off about Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch effectively asking questions we're all asking, which is, why are their details being covered up in all this? And it goes on to say that Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, began defending the decision to withhold details from the public. We are likely to hear a deluge of information in the coming days relating to Rudy Kubana, his violent history, and the failure of public agencies to intervene. She said that clear advice from the CPS had been that important information about the perpetrator's past could not be made public to avoid jeopardising the legal proceedings or prejudicing the possible jury trial. To be honest with you, totally fine with me. This stuff is not going to be hidden forever, and to hide it from the jurors because it was a jury trial, probably more than fair enough. They are supposed to be going in as unbiased as possible, and finding out about this massive history before the trial, yeah, it's going to prejudice them. The trial had been expected to last 4 weeks until Rudy Kubana, 18, stunned everyone on Monday by pleading guilty to all charges. But what Farage and Badenoch also want answers to is why there was a 3-month gap between him being charged with 3 counts of murder and 10 counts of attempted murder and other charges, including terrorism, which were announced 3 days after the attack on July 29, and 2 additional charges on October 29. Those charges related to the discovery of an Al-Qaeda training manual and the presence of biological toxic ricin. They also want to know why the attack was still not being treated as terror-related despite the discovery. All fair questions, and ones that I have had too. It's also worth noting that a lot of people have been asking, well, why didn't these people use parliamentary privilege to actually spread this information that they actually did know about? And the answer is because the Speaker actually rescinded parliamentary privilege on this case, because obviously of the reasons of not jeopardising the trial. Again, I don't think that's an entirely unfair reason, but now that we are at the point where the trial is effectively over, all information should come out. And to be fair, it sounds like all information is going to come out. And from the sounds of it, it's not going to be great for our wonderful quangos and governmental bodies. I mean, already Prevent is looking like an absolute joke. Again, this child went to Prevent 3 separate times, and they basically thought he was okay. And then when you find out that Jacob Rees-Mogg was sent to Prevent, it makes you question, do they have their priorities right? So the Times goes on to say that this did seem like a completely random attack with no particular intention of promoting a political, religious, racial or ideological cause, which, as I say, is probably actually true for Rudy Cabana. He seemed to just hate kids and teachers as well, which, when you go to a Taylor Swift dance class, the kids are kids to him and the adults teaching them how to dance are, well, teachers to him, I would imagine. So unless we're considering anti-school to be a political position, which I guess it kind of is, I still think that's a bit of a stretch to call it terrorism, at least according to these rules. I mean, at the end of the day, he's pleaded guilty to terrorism, so this is a terrorist offence. Or at least, I think he got the terrorist offence for owning the Al-Qaeda manual and making the ricin from it. So he is a terrorist, because he's pled guilty to being a terrorist. But annoyingly, that's for an incident that is kind of separate to the Southport attacks. So you can call him a terrorist, that's actually technically correct. But the attack itself wasn't a terrorist attack, oddly enough. Anyway, this appears consistent with what we now know about Rudy Cabana's long history of violence, one of the reasons for his 3 referrals to Prevent. The government's counter-extremism programme, with his interest in killing children as part of a school massacre. Again, as we saw in his biography, that seemed to happen actually quite a few times. The Prevent panel that was responsible for assessing Rudy Cabana concluded that he was not motivated by a terrorist ideology or posed a terrorist danger. Again, it's annoying, this whole process. That is technically correct, because one, they won't have known about the Al-Qaeda manual, but this attack, technically, because of the letter of the law, was not a terrorist incident. He technically, annoyingly, and I'm not defending Prevent here in any sense of the word, but technically they were correct. He did not pose a terrorist danger, however he did pose a general danger. But because of this, they decided not to escalate him to channel the programme's next stage. I mean, this is how screwed up the British system is, because technically he didn't harbour terrorist sympathies, terrorist ideology or a terrorist danger. Prevent actually couldn't do anything. The letter of the law is just nuts. Realistically, what should have happened is, okay, he's not technically a terrorist danger, however, he is a general danger. We should probably refer him to other services, but they didn't do that. That is where the failure comes in. I really do hate the British state, by the way. Channel is a counter-radicalisation scheme that provides ideological mentoring and extracurricular activities in an attempt to divert an individual away from extremism. They literally just try and distract them away from being extremists. Amazing. How's that working out? Apparently quite well, because we're not having that many terrorist incidents. This decision is likely to be at the heart of the public inquiry announced by the Home Secretary and how the state failed to stop the teenager killing 3 young girls. And that's absolutely right. Thank God there is a public inquiry over this. I know Starmer's making a speech on this today as well, but I'm not going to cover it because I know he's just going to say a load of platitudes. Oh, it was awful what happened in Southport, wasn't it? Right, inquiry time. I promise with our public service we will get to the bottom of this, etc, etc. I'm not going through it. There's a public inquiry going on. That's good to see. Again, as I say, because the British state is so absolutely monumentally moronic, Prevent probably will be found to have not done anything wrong, because even though he did attack these girls, because it wasn't technically a terrorist attack, they did their job, because their job is to just go after and de-radicalise terrorists. As far as we're concerned, he didn't do a terrorist attack. At least that's what the police say. So with all this bum covering from other institutions as well, this inquiry, I am really afraid to say, will probably end up with very little use. Because as I say, by the letter of the law, Prevent didn't really do anything wrong. So it'll be a lot like the grooming gang scandal and inquiries. They will look into it, they will say, yeah, there are problems everywhere, here are some suggestions that we have. One of them is probably that if they're not a terrorist but clearly a danger, please refer them to social services. That'll probably be one of the recommendations, and that'll be it. No one will go to jail over this, no one will be actually facing consequences from the British state over this, and guess what? You're not going to pacify what the underlying issues that ended up causing the unrest in the summer actually were. And so you've still got that to contend with. How are you going to deal with that? Because I really don't like seeing Britain being full of riots, believe it or not. And I really don't want any violent solutions to any of this, because we are a country that can get past that sort of thing. Anyway, that is all I am going to go through today, or at least for this video. So, shill time. Tonight it's Tosh Talks. The topic is we are going to be reviewing the Lotus Eaters' takes on Nigel Farage, because frankly they need to give their head a wobble. So do catch that over on the Worcester Club tonight at 9 PM. Videos out as and when I can make them, because I thought there was going to be another stream this week, but I don't think there is. Next week, however, we are finally returning with the Antiquity stream. So Jack's finally back, and we are going to carry on with the Peloponnesian Wars. That's next Monday on the Worcester Club, 9 PM. Tuesday, it's Tosh News. We will be going through news of the past 2 weeks on that day, again over on the Worcester Club with a panel. And then that's probably Friday, I think. We are going to be going through Laughing at the Guardian again, so do look forward to that. To help out the channel, all you need to do is subscribe, leave a comment telling me what you think of the topic today and the things we've gone through, and also leave a like. They are completely free ways to help out the channel. If you think I deserve more, though, you can always become a member for £2 or leave super chats on Super Thanks. They are very direct ways to help the channel. But as I say, that's everything I have for you for this video, so once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.